When we think about global trade, we usually picture these massive cargo ships smoothly cruising across vast oceans, right? But the reality? The global economy is actually completely tied to a few incredibly congested, ultra-high stakes choke points. Today, in this explainer, we're zooming in on one of the most volatile and critical regions on the entire planet, the Horn of Africa. Right now, there is a literal geopolitical earthquake happening over there, and it's all driven by one nation's desperate all-or-nothing quest to break out of a geographic trap. We're going to unpack the data, the historical turning points, and the explosive new agreements that are setting the stage for either a massive economic boom or a devastating regional conflict. Let's get right into it.
To really grasp the gravity of this situation, you just have to look at this staggering number. $1.5 billion. That is the massive toll that Ethiopia, which by the way is the world's most populous landlocked nation, pays every single year just in port fees to its tiny neighbor Djibouti. Think about that for a second. Imagine being a nation of over 120 million people, hustling to build a modern economy, but having to pay $1.5 billion cover charge every single year just to access the global market. It's a huge, persistent drain on their resources, and it fundamentally caps how fast and how far the nation can grow.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the geographic trap, the high cost of being landlocked.
So how exactly did they get stuck in this structural bottleneck? Because right now, lacking a sovereign maritime gateway means literally every single import drives up domestic inflation. Well, let's trace the timeline. The modern geographic trap was essentially set back in 1993. That was the year Ethiopia actually lost its coastline following Eritrea's independence. Practically overnight, the Red Sea went from being Ethiopia's front door to being, well, a distant, totally inaccessible window. For 3 decades, that reality just simmered. But flash forward to 2024, and the controversial, aggressive search for a sovereign gateway officially kicks off, setting a very loud ticking clock. In fact, economic planners are projecting that by 2030, the actions being taken today will permanently alter the entire GDP trajectory of East Africa.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Somaliland Memorandum, a controversial naval rebirth.
To break this economic stranglehold, they've launched a stunningly ambitious project designed to basically rewrite the map of East Africa. Let's break down exactly how this memorandum is supposed to work on the ground. Step 1. Secure a 20-kilometer coastal lease from Hargeisa, over in the self-declared Republic of Somaliland. Step 2. Transform that stretch of coastline into a thriving commercial hub to totally bypass Djibouti. But Step 3. This is where the sheer technical challenge and strategic ambition really hit you. Building a permanent military base, we are talking about the immense, almost mind-boggling logistical hurdle of rebuilding the Ethiopian Navy entirely from scratch. And remember, they're doing this without even having an active domestic shoreline to launch from yet. It is a monumental undertaking on a wildly rapid timeline.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how Addis Ababa actually frames the core argument driving this whole initiative. They aren't just presenting this as, good economic policy. It is being defined as a matter of life and death. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has called access to the Red Sea, quote, an existential natural right essential for the nation's survival, end quote. When a government views a geopolitical goal not just as a preference, but as an absolute existential right tied directly to their survival, it signals that they are willing to take some extraordinary, unprecedented risks to get it done.
Moving right along to Section 3, regional friction and the risk of hot conflict.
Of course, extraordinary risks naturally create massive ripple effects. This unilateral move hasn't occurred in a vacuum, and when you try to redraw the economic and military map of the Horn of Africa, the neighbors are absolutely going to push back hard. The most immediate and intense pushback comes straight from Mogadishu. Somalia fiercely maintains that Somaliland is part of its sovereign territory, therefore Mogadishu's response to this memorandum, swift and severe. We're seeing aggressive diplomatic retaliation across the board. They are mounting intense legal battles centered entirely on the preservation of their territorial integrity. And crucially, this specific dispute has forced other nations to pick sides, leading to a deep and potentially really destabilizing polarization right down the middle of the African Union.
So, the crucial point is that this local dispute is rapidly snowballing into a much broader regional standoff. A new counteraxis is forming right before our eyes. Egypt and Eritrea, 2 nations with their own very complex histories and strategic interests when it comes to Ethiopia, are uniting. Their shared goal? Containing Addis Ababa's maritime expansion. This new alliance significantly raises the stakes, transforming what was a bilateral dispute over a port lease into a multi-nation strategic blockade that fundamentally alters the balance of power in the region.
Now you might be wondering, why does the rest of the world care if these regional powers are staring at each other down?
Well, it's because of this exact location, the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. This is a remarkably fragile maritime choke point connecting the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden and the Indian Ocean. A massive percentage of the world's energy and commercial goods flow through this narrow stretch of water every single day. Any potential military escalation here doesn't just hurt the local economies. It instantly threatens to destabilize global security and disrupt international energy transit. Literally, if this strait gets choked off by conflict, the entire global economy is going to feel the pain.
Let's zoom out a bit for Section 4, Global Trade Wars, Superpowers on the Chessboard.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what happens when you have that level of global vulnerability. International actors are rapidly pulling up chairs to this table. The Horn of Africa has essentially become a giant chessboard for superpowers, with everyone trying to protect their own supply lines while simultaneously checking the influence of their rivals. Just look at this crazy web of influence. On one side, you have the Middle East brokers, the UAE and Turkey, acting as rival power brokers by financing infrastructure and even funneling advanced drone technology to different players in the region. Then you've got the Western watchers. The US and the EU are treading very carefully. They are highly cautious about any new naval power emerging near the world's most critical energy transit lanes. And finally, the alternative financiers. Ethiopia is making a huge strategic pivot toward the BRICS Plus bloc to secure alternative non-Western funding for this massive Gateway to the Sea project. It is literally a masterclass in modern multipolar geopolitics.
Let's move to and see how this builds into our final segment. Section 5. The Future of the Horn. New Economic Corridors.
We are standing at a dramatic crossroads right now. The actions happening today will absolutely dictate the reality of this entire region for the next decade. Based on the source material, we're looking at two starkly different potential outcomes. On one hand, we have this utopian vision, a blue economy boom. If Ethiopia actually pulls this off and successfully establishes a sovereign port, it significantly reduces its dependency on volatile neighbors. It opens up brand new transit routes, and just like planners project, creates a massive upward GDP trajectory for all of East Africa by 2030. But, on the flip side, there is a very real dystopian threat, a generational regional war. If the diplomatic fallout fails, the intense pushback from Mogadishu, Egypt, and Eritrea could easily erupt into a hot military conflict, totally destabilizing one of the globe's most vital maritime choke points.
So it all comes down to this deeply unsettled dynamic. Will this bold, unprecedented quest for the sea successfully secure Ethiopia's economic future? Or will the resulting geopolitical friction spark a conflict that literally sinks the entire Horn of Africa? The pieces are moving incredibly fast. The global superpowers are watching every single move, and the final outcome is going to reshape international trade as we know it. Keep your eyes on the Red Sea.